The sun had just dipped below the horizon when Cassie turned the Jeep onto the old gravel path, its headlights slicing through the gathering dusk. The air was cool and carried the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves, a perfect October evening. Cassie's excitement was palpable in the tight grip she had on the steering wheel and the bright gleam in her eyes. "Are you sure this is it?" Ethan asked from the back seat, leaning forward to peer through the windshield at the shadowy outline of Wentworth Asylum looming in the distance. "This is it," Cassie confirmed with a nod, her voice a mix of thrill and nervous anticipation. The infamous Wentworth Asylum, home to 1,000 ghost stories and maybe a few ghosts. Joel chuckled and punched Ethan lightly on the shoulder. "Scared already, man? We haven't even gotten out of the car." Ethan shot him a glare. "I'm just making sure we're not trespassing into someone's backyard." "That'd be a great headline, huh? Ghost hunters arrested for bumbling into wrong house." Leah, who was fiddling with her camera beside him, smiled. "That would at least make for a memorable Halloween." But Ethan's right. We need to be careful. This place isn't just creepy. It's got history dripping from every wall. As they pulled up to the gates, the imposing iron bars stood like silent sentinels, rusted and overgrown with ivy. The asylum's main building was a silhouette against the twilight sky, its broken windows gaping darkly as if in a perpetual scream. Maya, the quietest of the group, finally spoke up. "It looks even scarier than the pictures. Are we really going in there?" Cassie's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Absolutely. That's what we came here for, right? To catch a glimpse of what's haunting this place. Or at least find out why it feels haunted." She parked the Jeep, and they all disembarked, the doors slamming shut with echoes that seemed too loud in the quiet of the evening. They gathered their equipment, flashlights, cameras, and a couple of old-fashioned tape recorders for capturing any unexplained noises. "Remember, stick together," Cassie instructed as she pushed open the creaking gate. "No wandering off. This place is huge, and it's easy to get lost. And watch where you step. The floor might not be as solid as it looks." They moved through the underbrush, the beams from their flashlights darting around, briefly illuminating patches of wild growth and the occasional scurrying animal. As they approached the main entrance, the true enormity of Wentworth Asylum became apparent. It was a sprawling edifice of Gothic architecture, its spires and turrets outlined ghostly against the night sky. Joel was the first to reach the door, a large wooden barrier studded with metal that swung open with an eerie groan at his push. "After you, fearless leader," he said, gesturing grandly to Cassie. Taking a deep breath, Cassie stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The beam flicked across peeling paint, cracked tiles, and a grand staircase covered in debris. "This place is a gold mine," she whispered, almost reverently. They moved deeper into the foyer, their footsteps echoing ominously. The air was cool and musty, filled with the scent of mold and neglect. "Do you hear that?" Leah suddenly asked, stopping in her tracks. They all went still, listening. A soft drip-drip-drip sound could be heard somewhere in the shadows, along with the faint rustling of leaves or maybe fabric. Each sound seemed magnified in the vast emptiness of the hall. "It's just water leaking somewhere," Ethan suggested after a moment, but his voice held a note of uncertainty. "Or the first welcoming committee," Joel added with a smirk, trying to lighten the mood. "Let's set up a base here in the foyer," Cassie decided. "We can explore in pairs. Maya, you're with me. Ethan and Leah, take the east wing. Joel, you and the recorder get the west. If anyone feels weird or wants to bail, we meet back here." "Agreed?" "Agreed," they echoed, albeit some more reluctantly than others. As they split up, each pair taking a different direction, the reality of their endeavor settled over them like the dust of ages. Wentworth Asylum awaited, ready to reveal its secrets to those daring enough to uncover them. The floors creaked under their weight as Cassie and Maya ventured down the dimly lit hallway, their flashlights casting long shadows against the flaking walls. The silence of the asylum was almost tangible, filled only by the sound of their own breaths and the occasional distant drip of water echoing through the vast, empty spaces. "This place is incredible," Cassie whispered, stopping to take a photo of a mural that, despite its age and the peeling paint, depicted a serene landscape completely at odds with the decay around them. Can you imagine what went on here at the height of its operation? Maya shuddered slightly. I'm not sure I want to. There's a heaviness here, Cass. It's like the walls are saturated with old grief and pain. As they continued exploring, they came upon a large, barred window that offered a view over the asylum's overgrown courtyard. The moonlight streamed in, casting an eerie glow that seemed to momentarily brighten the hallway. It's beautiful, in a haunting sort of way, Maya commented, her voice soft, her breath fogging slightly in the cold air. Yeah, haunting is right, Cassie agreed, taking another photo before turning her flashlight back to the corridor ahead. Meanwhile, Ethan and Leah had made their way to the east wing, where the patient rooms were located. The doors were mostly ajar, some hanging off their hinges. Leah paused at each threshold, camera ready, capturing the desolation. Look at this one, Leah said, gesturing towards a room where the wall was covered in scribbles. Dates, names, words in a frantic, looping hand that seemed to convey desperation. Ethan read some of the words aloud. Never leave, never leave. This is creepy. He ran his fingers over the indentations, feeling the dried paint and the roughness of the wall. It feels like someone was trying really hard to communicate something, or keep something at bay, Leah added, her voice barely above a whisper. She took a step inside, her flashlight beam dancing across the small, stark room. Suddenly, she stopped, her light fixed on the corner. Ethan, look. He moved closer, and his breath caught as he saw what she was pointing at. A faded drawing of what looked like a family, but with exaggerated, almost grotesque features. Underneath it was scrawled, "They watch." Back in the foyer, Joel was examining the layout of the asylum with the floor plan he had found on an old, water-damaged blueprint hanging by the reception desk. His recorder was on, the red light blinking silently in the dark. Not exactly the Ritz, is it? He muttered to himself, tracing a route with his finger. Let's see what the West Wing holds. As he entered the West Wing, his flashlight illuminated a long corridor lined with treatment rooms. At the far end, he noticed something unusual, a door that looked newer than the others. Curiosity piqued, he headed towards it, recorder in hand. Now, what have we here? Joel spoke into the recorder. A modern addition to our ancient haunted house, folks. He pushed the door open, revealing a room that looked like it had been used for isolation. Unlike the other rooms, this one was almost entirely empty except for a single chair in the center, straps dangling from the arms and legs. Charming, Joel commented dryly, entering slowly. He circled the chair, the beam of his flashlight catching on something on the floor. Bending down, he picked up a small, metallic object. A key, he wondered aloud, turning it over in his hand. What are you for? Suddenly, he felt a chill, as if a draft had swept through the room. He shivered, zipping up his jacket. All right, time to head back, he decided, pocketing the key. Meanwhile, Cassie and Maya had found their way to what looked like a nurse's station. Papers and medical supplies were scattered everywhere, as if left in a hurry. Cassie rifled through the papers, looking for anything that could tell them more about the history of the place. Here's something, Maya called out, holding up a battered, leather-bound journal. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. She opened it, and they both leaned over to read the faded writing. It's a patient journal, Cassie said, her voice filled with excitement and a hint of dread. Looks like it was kept by someone named Eleanor. The entries are sporadic, but they mention a doctor, Dr. Langford. Seems he was a key figure here. The entries spoke of treatments and therapies, many of which seemed more torturous than therapeutic. The tone of the journal grew increasingly frantic, the entries more disjointed. Listen to this, Maya read, her voice shaky. The doctor says it will help, but I hear them scream at night. I don't want to forget who I am, but the lights, they make the shadows move. What happened here, Cass? Cassie didn't answer immediately, lost in thought. I don't know, but I think whatever it was, it's still here. And we're going to find out. The unsettling stillness of Wentworth Asylum seemed to thicken as Cassie and Maya continued their exploration. Each step they took echoed through the abandoned corridors, blending with the occasional creaks and groans of the old building settling around them. The deeper they ventured into the heart of the asylum, the more oppressive the atmosphere felt. "This place just keeps getting creepier," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible as they reached the end of a particularly dark hallway. "I know," Cassie replied, shining her flashlight on a heavy metal door at the end of the corridor. "Let's see what's behind this one." She grasped the cold handle, turned it with a loud clunk, and pushed the door open. The room beyond was vast and filled with rows of empty beds, their rusted frames casting eerie shadows on the floor. Old straps and buckles dangled from some, suggesting their use for restraint rather than rest. The walls were adorned with faded paintings of pastoral scenes, stark contrasts to the grim reality of their surroundings. Maya shuddered. It's like they were trying to mask the horror with these peaceful images, or trying to calm the storm inside the minds of those forced to stay here, Cassie mused, stepping further into the room. She stopped suddenly, shining her flashlight on the wall where names and dates were etched crudely into the plaster. "Look at this, Maya. It's like a hidden memorial." Maya came closer, tracing her fingers over the names. So many lost souls. Their solemn moment was broken by a sudden crackling sound coming from their walkie-talkies. "Cassie, Maya, do you copy? This is Ethan. You guys might want to see this." Ethan's voice was tense, urgent. "We're on our way back," Cassie responded, her curiosity piqued. They made their way back to the meeting point, the weight of the room's sorrow lingering in their minds. Meanwhile, Ethan and Leah had made a chilling discovery in the East Wing. They stood in what appeared to be an old therapy room, where faded diagrams of the human brain were still visible on a chalkboard, surrounded by notes on various treatments. "This stuff is medieval," Leah said, examining an old electroshock machine. Its leather straps were worn, and its metal electrodes were tarnished with age. "Can you imagine the pain they inflicted here, all in the name of science?" "It's barbaric," Ethan agreed, taking photos with his camera. These were not just patients. They were victims. Their exploration was interrupted by Joel's voice crackling through the walkie-talkie. "Guys, you need to check this out. I found something weird in the West Wing." Gathering their equipment, Ethan and Leah quickly made their way to meet Joel, who was waiting for them outside a secluded room tucked away behind the main treatment areas. The door was slightly ajar, and as they entered, they found Joel staring at a large, old-fashioned bathtub filled with blackened water. "What the hell?" Ethan exclaimed, stepping closer to inspect it. "It's a hydrotherapy tub," Joel explained, his flashlight beams circling the tub. "They use these for thermal shock treatments. But look at this." He pointed to the walls, where faint scratches and messages were visible. "The patients left these marks." Leah leaned in, reading the inscriptions. "Help us. I want to go home. It burns." "It's heartbreaking. They were trapped in their own nightmares," Joel said grimly. "This place holds too many secrets." As they continued to explore the room, Leah noticed a small, rusted box tucked away in a corner. She reached for it, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the lid. Inside were several small personal items, a tarnished silver locket, a handful of marbles, and a crumpled photograph of a smiling woman. "These were someone's belongings," Leah said softly, holding up the photograph. "Someone who probably never left this place." The gravity of their findings was not lost on them. Each item was a poignant reminder of the lives that had been broken within the asylum's walls. Regrouping with Cassie and Maya, they shared their discoveries. The atmosphere among the group was somber. The joy of exploration had given way to a resolve to uncover the truth and perhaps bring some peace to the spirits still lingering in the shadows. "We need to document everything," Cassie said decisively. "Let's cover as much as we can and compile our findings. We owe it to them." Nodding in agreement, the group split up again, determined to delve even deeper into the dark history of Wentworth Asylum. With each step, they unraveled more of the chilling legacy left behind, driven by a newfound duty to shine a light on the dark corners of human history hidden within these walls. The basement of Wentworth Asylum was cold and damp, with a pervasive smell of mildew and decay that seemed to cling to every surface. Cassie and Maya descended the creaky old stairs carefully, the weak beams of their flashlights barely illuminating the path before them. Why do basements in places like this always have to feel like the beginning of a horror movie? Maya half-joked, trying to lighten the mood. Because they usually are, Cassie replied with a wry smile. Keep your eyes peeled for anything unusual. This place was the heart of the asylum's operations. As they reached the bottom, the basement opened up into a large area filled with rows of filing cabinets, some overturned, papers strewn all over the floor. The walls were lined with shelves holding dusty medical bottles, some still containing dark, unidentifiable liquids. Wow, look at all this, Maya said. Approaching a cabinet, she pulled open a drawer, which groaned in protest. Inside were files, yellowed and brittle with age. She pulled one out and blew off a layer of dust. These are patient files. Cassie joined her, and together they started to sift through the documents, uncovering names and dates, treatments prescribed, and doctors' notes written in hurried, often illegible handwriting. These files are like a window into the past, Cassie mused. Each one tells a story of someone's pain. Meanwhile, Ethan and Leah, having finished their exploration of the East Wing, had ventured to join Joel in the West Wing. They found him staring at a locked door at the end of a hallway. "What's up?" Ethan asked as they approached. "I found this key." Joel held up the small metallic object, "and I'm betting it opens this door. It doesn't match the others. It's too new." With a nod from Leah, Joel slid the key into the lock, turning it with a satisfying click. The door swung open, revealing a small room that appeared to have been used for storage. But what caught their attention was not the contents. Rather, it was the room itself, which was lined with thick, soundproof padding. "This is no ordinary storage room," Leah said, stepping inside cautiously. "Why would they need soundproofing?" Joel entered after her, scanning the room with his flashlight. Maybe to keep sounds from getting out, or maybe to keep them in. Either way, it doesn't bode well. Back in the basement, Cassie and Maya had uncovered an old leather-bound ledger. The cover was cracked and worn, but the writing inside was meticulous. It detailed the arrival and discharge dates of patients, but some entries had ominous annotations like transferred to special care or treatment unsuccessful, continued observation required. These entries, some of these patients never left, Maya said, a chill running down her spine. They were experiments, not patients, Cassie concluded grimly. This place wasn't just an asylum, it was a lab. They were doing something to these people, something that wasn't meant to get out. As they delved deeper into the patient histories, they began to piece together a horrifying picture. The treatments described were cruel and unusual, often more akin to torture than any legitimate medical practice. "We need to get this information out," Maya insisted. "People need to know what happened here." Cassie nodded in agreement. "First, we need to see if there's any more evidence. There's got to be more here that can tell us what they were really up to." They continued to explore the basement, discovering a hidden door behind a false wall. The space beyond was even colder, the air stale. Inside, they found an array of strange, outdated medical equipment and several large, metal contraptions that resembled hospital beds but were fitted with restraints and various mechanical devices. "This is it," Cassie whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the cramped space. "This is where they did it." The horror of the realization was overwhelming, but Cassie and Maya were determined to uncover the full truth. They documented everything, taking pictures and making notes, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them. Meanwhile, Ethan, Leah, and Joel had left the soundproofed room, disturbed by their find but eager to regroup with Cassie and Maya to share their discoveries. As they made their way back to the basement, the air seemed to grow colder, the darkness deeper. When they finally reconvened, the gravity of their combined discoveries hung heavily in the air. They knew they were standing in a place of immense suffering and darkness, a place where unspeakable things had happened. "We need to make sure nothing like this ever happens again," Leah said firmly. "Let's gather everything we can and expose the truth of Wentworth Asylum." The group agreed, more united than ever, their mission clear. But as they prepared to leave the basement, the sound of something heavy dragging across the floor above made them pause. The adventure was not over yet. The asylum still had secrets to reveal, and perhaps it was not as abandoned as they had thought. In the dimly lit corridor of the basement, Cassie and Maya hesitated in front of a nondescript door that hadn't been on any of the original blueprints Joel had found. Cassie's hand hovered over the handle, her flashlight's beam flickering slightly as she took a deep breath. "Ready?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Let's do this," Maya replied, her tone resolute yet tinged with nervous anticipation. Cassie turned the knob slowly, the creaking of the hinge echoing ominously as the door swung open, revealing a room shrouded in darkness. The flashlight beams cut through the gloom, illuminating a scene that neither had expected. Rows of small, crude cages, some still containing remnants of torn clothing and shackles. "Oh my God!" Maya gasped, stepping inside. Her light fell on a small, rusted sign on the wall that read, "Subject holding." The implications of the words sent a chill through her spine. This was no asylum. This was a prison, or worse, a lab, Cassie said, her voice hardened with anger and sorrow. She moved further into the room, her flashlight uncovering an old ledger on a desk cluttered with scattered papers and ancient medical tools. Maya approached the cages, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the cold metal. These people were treated like animals, or test subjects, Cassie added grimly, flipping through the ledger. "Look at this." She held up the book for Maya to see. Entries detailed in a meticulous hand spoke of experiments and observations, devoid of any compassion or humanity. Back in the main hall, Ethan, Leah, and Joel had encountered their own horrors. In a large, open ward, they found walls covered in frescoes of disturbing, surreal imagery, faces contorted in anguish, twisted figures, and dark, looming shapes that seemed almost alive in the flickering light of their flashlights. "What happened here?" Leah murmured, her camera capturing every detail of the grotesque art. "It's like someone's nightmares spilled out onto the walls," Joel said, examining a particularly vivid scene of a dark figure towering over a cowering crowd. Ethan pointed to a corner of the room where an old projector was set up. "Maybe this will give us some answers." He approached the machine, dusting it off before loading a reel of film that lay nearby. With a flicker and whir, the projector sputtered to life, casting grainy black and white images onto the wall. The group watched in silence as the film showed scenes of patients being led into rooms, doctors in white coats, and disturbing experiments. No audio accompanied the film, but the visuals were enough to convey the story of cruelty and madness. "This is evidence," Leah said firmly, her voice steady despite the shaking of her hands. "This, we can use to show the world what went on here." As the film ended, a sense of urgency overtook them. "We need to gather as much as we can and get out," Ethan said, looking around warily. "This place, it's like it's starting to wake up." Meanwhile, Cassie and Maya had left the holding room, carrying the ledger and several other documents they had found. As they met up with the others, the weight of their discoveries hung heavily between them. "We found cages," Maya told the group, her face pale, like something out of a horror show. "And records of experiments," Cassie added, holding up the ledger. This place was doing unspeakable things. The group convened in the foyer, deciding on their next steps when suddenly the air grew cold, and a low moan echoed through the halls. Instinctively, they huddled closer, their flashlights darting around as the sound grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of whispers and cries. "It's the patients," Joel said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're still here." Leah, gripping her camera, nodded. "We need to help them somehow. We need to tell their story." With renewed determination, they agreed to make one last sweep of the asylum, looking for any more evidence that could help bring closure to the spirits trapped within. As they split up, each step was burdened with the responsibility of their mission, not just to explore, but to expose the darkness that lingered in the shadows of Wentworth Asylum. Each member of the group felt the weight of history around them, a history that had been hidden away in the dark, now begging to be brought to light. The rumbling noise above grew louder, more insistent. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, their hearts racing as the sense of something ominous lurking nearby deepened. They had gathered their findings, but the sudden unsettling noises made the decrepit walls of Wentworth Asylum seem more menacing than ever. "What was that?" Leah whispered, her voice trembling as dust fell from the ceiling. a testament to the disturbances caused by the unseen presence. "I don't know, but it doesn't feel right," Ethan replied, his usual calm demeanor replaced by an edge of urgency. "We should move now." Joel clutched his camera tighter, his mind racing with possibilities. Could it be the building settling, or something, or someone else? Cassie stepped forward, her leadership never more apparent. "Let's not wait to find out. Everyone, grab your gear. We leave together, right now." They quickly packed their equipment, securing the precious documents and recordings they had gathered. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of fear and adrenaline as they made their way toward the exit route they had memorized upon entry. The corridor stretched dark and foreboding before them, their flashlights casting long, eerie shadows as they moved. The noise above continued, a constant reminder that the asylum might still hold more secrets, more dangers than they had anticipated. As they neared the staircase leading to the main floor, a loud crash echoed through the building, stopping them in their tracks. A cloud of dust rolled down the stairs, obscuring their vision. "This place is coming apart," Maya exclaimed, coughing as she pulled her shirt over her nose and mouth. Ethan, ever the protector, took the lead. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Watch your step." They ascended the stairs cautiously, each step creaking ominously under their weight. At the top, the main hall greeted them with a vista of destruction. Debris littered the floor, and several doors hung off their hinges. Cassie paused, scanning the hall. "We can't go out the way we came in. It's blocked." "Let's try the east wing," Leah suggested, pointing towards a narrow service corridor. "It might lead us to the secondary exit." The group nodded, turning towards the corridor. Their progress was slow, hindered by obstacles and the ever-present threat of the building collapsing around them. Suddenly, a loud, shattering sound broke the tense silence. Behind them, a section of the ceiling gave way, crashing down and blocking the path they had just traveled. Dust and debris filled the air, causing them to cough and shield their eyes. "That was too close," Joel gasped, his face pale. "We need to get out now." Pushing forward, they finally reached the end of the corridor, which opened into a small, dilapidated room with a rusted metal door. The secondary exit, just as Leah had remembered. Cassie tried the handle, but it didn't budge. It stuck. "Let me try," Ethan said, stepping forward. He slammed his shoulder against the door repeatedly. On the third try, the door groaned and gave way, swinging open with a screech of protest. Fresh air rushed in, filling their lungs with the sweet, cold breeze of the outside world. They stumbled out, one by one, into the early morning light, each of them taking deep breaths as they finally escaped the oppressive atmosphere of the asylum. Once outside, they didn't stop moving until they had put a significant distance between themselves and the looming structure of Wentworth Asylum. Only then did they allow themselves a moment to rest, collapsing on the grassy hillside, overlooking the now distant building. "We made it," Maya said, her voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. Ethan looked back at the silhouette of the asylum against the rising sun. "Yeah, we did. But at what cost?" Leah, pulling her jacket tighter around her, turned to the group. "We have what we came for. We have evidence, we have recordings, everything we need to tell their story. It's our duty now." Joel nodded, looking at each of his friends. "Let's do right by them. Let's make sure the world knows what happened here." Cassie stood, her resolve hardened by their experiences. "We'll tell their story, and we'll make sure this place is never forgotten." As they gathered their things and started the walk back to their car, the first rays of the sun illuminated the path ahead. It was a path fraught with challenges and responsibilities, but they were ready to bring to light the dark secrets of Wentworth Asylum, and in doing so, perhaps provide some peace to those who had suffered there. Their journey had begun as a simple exploration, but it had transformed into a mission, a crusade for truth and justice in the memory of the forgotten. The first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon as Cassie and her friends finally emerged from the foreboding gates of Wentworth Asylum. They were weary, their faces etched with fatigue and the residue of terror, but there was a palpable sense of urgency among them. The Jeep's engine hummed softly in the quiet morning as they loaded their equipment, and the precious evidence they had collected. Cassie glanced at her friends, noticing the silent resolve in their eyes. "We did something important tonight," she said as she started the Jeep. "We need to make sure this gets out. The public needs to know what happened here." Ethan nodded, clutching a box of files and the old projector reel. "I'll start going through this as soon as we get back. We'll need everything documented meticulously." Maya, looking out the window at the receding silhouette of the asylum, shivered. "It feels like we're taking part of it with us. Does anyone else feel that?" Leah, who had been quiet, turned to her. "We are, in a way. We're carrying their stories now. It's our job to tell them." Joel, who had been checking his camera for the last set of photos he took, looked up. "We'll tell them, all right? And we'll make sure nobody forgets what went down in that hellhole." The drive back was quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts, processing the night's harrowing experiences and the weight of the task ahead of them. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows on the road, Cassie finally broke the silence. "Once we've compiled everything, we need to think about the best way to present it. This isn't just a ghost story. It's a piece of dark history, real people's pain and suffering." Ethan adjusted his glasses, deep in thought. "We could do a series of articles or a documentary. We have photos, videos, and now, physical evidence. Let's not forget the personal stories," Leah chimed in. "The patient records, the objects we found, the inscriptions on the walls. This is very personal. It's not just about exposing the horror, but also about humanizing the victims." Joel nodded. "We need to be respectful. This could stir up a lot of emotions and possibly controversy. We need to handle it delicately." Cassie agreed. "We'll start by organizing everything and then decide on how to go public. We might even need legal advice before we release anything." As they arrived back at their starting point, a local diner parking lot, the reality of their normal lives began to settle back in. They decided to grab some breakfast, a momentary return to normalcy before they dived into their project. Sitting in a booth, with steaming cups of coffee in front of them, they began to sketch out a plan. Maya opened her laptop and started a shared document, outlining the structure of their report. "We need a timeline of the asylum's operation, cross-referenced with the patient stories we uncovered," Ethan said, his voice steady, the role of analyst taking over. "We also need to verify the authenticity of everything before we go public." Leah, sifting through the photographs she had taken, added, "I'll contact some historians and experts in psychiatric care history. They might help validate our findings and provide context." Joel looked around at his friends, his expression serious. "Are we ready for the backlash? This could get intense." Cassie met his gaze, her determination clear. "We're not just doing this for us, or for the thrill, or even for the story. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do. These people, they're suffering. It deserves to be acknowledged." They all nodded, a silent pact forming among them as they returned to their task. The sun was fully up now, casting light on the small diner, a stark contrast to the darkness they had left behind at Wentworth Asylum. As they continued to work, the server brought over more coffee, and the diner's radio played soft, morning tunes. Life outside continued unaffected, but for Cassie and her friends, everything had changed. They were no longer just curious explorers but guardians of a tragic truth, committed to shining a light on the shadows they had uncovered. The road ahead would be challenging, but together, they felt ready to face whatever came their way, driven by the memories of those they had vowed to speak for, the forgotten souls of Wentworth Asylum.